Here we're going to tie a fly called the Possie bugger. First thing I did was I added a bead to the front of the hook and added some lead wire right behind that bead. The next step is to tie in the tail, and the recipe calls for Australian possum, but that's not something that's very common, so I substitute just some rabbit fur, some natural rabbit fur. We want it to be about half the length of the hook, so I just roughly measure that out. Tie that in right on top of the shank of the hook. Take our thread forward to just before I get to my wire. I could trim out the excess. Next thing to do is to tie in some Flashabou. I'm going to tie a piece of Flashabou on each side of the fly. Let it hang back off the tail. Then we're going to trim that Flashabou a little bit longer than the tail. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in our copper wire, which is going to be our rib. I'm going to tie that in along the side of the hook. Then we're going to do the same thing with another piece of pearl Flashabou. Now once we have both of those tied in, just let them hang back there out of the way. We're going to tie in some natural or synthetic rabbit dubbing, tan in color. And we're just going to dub a tapered body. Possie bugger is dubbed a little bit more generous than other flies. It's supposed to be a caddis or some type of larger emerger. It's going to be dubbed much heavier than a mayfly imitation or a midge. But you still have to be careful not to get carried away. I usually add in small clumps and just add as I go. And we're going to dub almost all the way forward. We're going to leave just a little bit less than a bead space away from the bead. Have just a little bit more to go. Just a hair more. It's a lot easier to add than it is to take off. There we go. So we leave just a little bit of space. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that Flashabou. We're going to wrap that Flashabou around our body as a rib. Try to do that as evenly as possible. Then we're going to take our copper wire and we're going to counter wrap through our fly. This will help keep that Flashabou in place, hold the fly together. We can spiral our wire. Break it out of there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a partridge feather. We're going to strip off all the fluffy portion at the base, and I clip it in to my hackle pliers at the tip. I just take those fibers and I'm going to stroke them backwards like so. Then we can tie in to that area on the tip. You can trim out the tip. Then we're actually going to take that partridge. We're going to spin a collar. Usually just takes a few wraps. You got to be careful not to overdo it at this point. Then once you've wrapped all the way to your stem, you can capture it. Trim out the stem. Just force all these fibers back with just a couple of wraps, just like so. Then we're going to dub the head. I'm going to take some black ice dub, and you got to be very careful not to use too much here. We're going to put it on very sparse, very thin. And dub it very tight onto the thread. What I mean by that is not shaggy. You want it to bind to the thread. We're just going to take a few wraps with this black dubbing. Make a bit of a collar at the head. This will also help your fibers to lay back. Once you have that head dubbed, you can whip finish. And that's all there is to the Possie bugger. Very effective trout fly. Makes a good caddis pattern, good emerger. Carp also seem to like it as well. Just a good all-around buggy fly.